Hello, everybody, and welcome to Calls. It is Ryder Cup week, one of the, if not the biggest spectacle in professional golf. 24 of the world's best players play for national pride as they converge this year onto Whistling Straits in Kohler, Wisconsin. American captain Steve Stricker, European captain Padraig Harrington have made their selections. And we are going to dig into as much data as we can and figure out what's going to happen this year. If you'll remember, the Europeans are your defending champions after completely dismantling the Americans in 2018. So the Americans hoping for some better success this year, and Captain Steve Stricker went with a little bit of a different approach, bringing in quite a few rookies to the Ryder Cup when most often or most of the time the Americans bring seasoned vets. So it'll be interesting to see if that works. Like I said, we're at Whistling Straits in Kohler, Wisconsin, on the edge or on the shoreline of Lake Michigan. It's a fun week. It always is. Just a few announcements before we get into it. Follow me on social media. My betting cards and other information will be online, especially on Twitter, so the links are in the description below. Stats are provided by Fantasy National. As always, chat is open. Let me know what you're thinking tonight, what you want to see, who you're pulling for, maybe individually or team-wise. Who you want to see not do well for whatever specific reason, what your predictions are. Just let me know. Would love to have the interaction, have some banter back and forth. Hopefully your week of the Fortinet went very well. Congratulations to Max Homa. The second time he has won in California this calendar year. He won the Genesis Invitational earlier this year in February of 2021, so technically last season, but not a successful outright, betting card or sportsbook card for me. But DFS was pretty darn successful. I feel like I had some pretty good choices this week, good fades, good pivots. So, but we're not here to talk about the Fortinet. We're here for the Ryder Cup. So, with all that being said, let's research the 2021 Ryder Cup. And we're going to start with the tournament fact sheet. This has been out for about a week or so. Let me move my Gatorades here. Get ready to talk quite a bit tonight. Most of the time, or at least in the professional events that Whistling Straits has held, the 2004, 2010, and 2015 PGA Championship, it played as a par 72. This week, it's going to play as a par 71 at just over 7,300 yards. Still a pretty long course. The views are just stunning. Like I mentioned, it's on the shore of Lake Michigan. It stretches for about 2 miles along the shoreline. Some breathtaking views. And for good golfers, some pretty difficult tests. For amateur golfers like myself and bad golfers, just nightmare. Utter chaos. But with that, as we look into some of the course statistics, the green sizes are actually pretty big. They're about 7,000 square feet, so about 1,000 square feet larger than the normal tour green size. It is a peat dye design. So there's going to be a lot of ability to drill down into some peat dye data on Fantasy National. So that's always a plus there. Acres of rough, I always like seeing 200 plus when they just stop counting. There's a lot of rough, and sand bunkers, a lot. It's the best way to put it, a lot. There's 3 water hazards, mainly Lake Michigan, but there's also 1 or 2 inside the course, but there's only 1 hole where that water comes into play. The greens this week at Whistling Straits are bent grass. and they're going to be cut very short. Just a very difficult test of golf. Fairways are bent grass and POA, with the rough being some pretty thick fescue. One of the main differences between the Ryder Cup and other PGA Tour events, it is a team event. So the Americans versus the Europeans, and it's unlike the Zurich Classic. It's set up in a bit of a modified format, and you have 4 ball and 4 sums. And I always mix up the two. 4 ball is commonly known as best ball, where there are 4 balls in play. You have 2 partners, and you each play your own ball. So it's not a scramble, but the teammate with the lowest score is the score that the team will take. So, for example, if Bryson and Dustin Johnson are teamed up, Bryson gets a 3, Dustin gets a 4. That team records a 3 on the scorecard. As opposed to 4 sums, which is most oftenly called alternate shot, where a teammate will drive or take the tee shot, the other one will hit the next, so on and so forth until the ball's in the hole. And then all of that is in match play format. So it's a very, very fun event, very unique. A lot of national pride is taken. It's a spectacle. It's a fun event. So there is the tournament fact sheet for Whistling Straits this week. I'm going to close that out. We're going to bring up Fantasy National, and I went ahead and added one filter. I've went to the time frame of the last 2 years for reasons we'll look at here in a bit. But over the past 50 rounds in the last 2 years, you can see that Jon Rahm is your strokes gained leader, coming off a missed cut at the Fortinet. I imagine I heard some bit of his post-game interview or post-round interview. He said he feels pretty okay. He said he actually felt better when he tested positive for COVID than he does this week, so he didn't know what was going on, but he always likes having some competitive rounds heading into a big tournament. He just likes to have the mental approach to that. So miscut at the Fortinet, I really wouldn't take that as a sign of where his game is. I imagine his health is just fine heading into Ryder Cup week. And as you can see, number 1 in strokes gained total, for obvious reasons, is the number 1 player in the world. 2-time major champion this year. What is there to say for Jon Rahm? Then you have Spieth, Cantlay, Casey, and Morikawa are the rest of the top 5. And because there's only 24 players here, we can really dig in. Sorry, let me make sure chat's up. We can really dig in to a lot of data here this week, and that's exciting. Perhaps there will be a little bit of over-analysis, as you don't want to dissect every minute little detail, but with a very small field, we'll have the capability to do that. So the first thing I kind of want to look at is a rough breakdown of Whistling Straits. And again, this is from mainly the PGA Championships, so this is going to read as a par 72. However, the 11th is actually going to play as a long par 4. On the scorecard, it says 519 par 4, so this is a little bit misconstrued. I imagine it's going to be one of the tougher holes this week, and we'll go in a hole by hole little preview. We won't use Pro Visualizer, but I found on Ryder Cup's website kind of an overlook of each hole, so that'll probably be pretty useful. But you can see here that there are certainly points in the course that it can be attacked or gotten. Not necessarily a lot of eagles, although it's not uncommon, I should say, but there are definitely times where it can jump up and bite you. You have a 32% bogey rate, 30%, 30%. There are holes that are just extremely tough. Extremely tough. 17 and 18 is sometimes called two of the most difficult closing holes in PGA Tour golf. It is a rough course, and if your game is not fine tuned and precise. So when we come down here and look at some of the metrics, you'll notice that putting is so astronomically important here at Whistling Straits. And that's because the greens are so big, but they are undulating and they are, I won't say misshapen, but a lot of times they're either long and narrow or very wide, but shallow. It's a fun design that Pete Dye has here at Whistling Straits. There are no straight putts on these greens. You'll hit what you think is a good shot, and it will, trickle 20 feet away from its landing spot on the green. It's going to be fun to watch. So that's why putting is absolutely is the biggest overarching statistic this week. Off the tee, also very important. If you're not finding the fairway, you're not giving yourself or your partner, if you're playing alternate shot, much of a chance. And you're going to have some distance on this course as well. This course is long. So off the tee is going to matter quite a bit. I'm actually a little surprised that it weighs more than approach. But to be honest with you, that all three of these metrics are fairly close. Again, don't be misconstrued by the graph. I mean, you have around the green at 0.2 and off the tee at 0.3, with putting almost 0.4.5. So putting absolutely number one factor this week, and then you have your ball striking off the tee and approach being the next two. For the stroke gain by hole by par fives easily outweigh the threes and the fours, as is most of the time on the PGA Tour. But especially here, the par fives you kind of have to take advantage of here at Whistling Straits and hold on for dear life on the rest of the course. The par fours are going to be pretty important as well, and we'll dig into some of the data a little bit tonight, but more so tomorrow at the Data Dive show. How I think this is a bit misleading. It says that the par fours are less important than the par threes. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it is very clear that the par fives are the most important stroke gain by par by hole. So we'll definitely be looking into some par 5 data as we did at the Fortinet. If you'll remember, we kind of discovered that the par 4s and the par 5s were the main factor. And while it didn't lead me to Max Homa as the winner, it certainly gave me a lot of good data on who was going to finish up near the top of the leaderboard. And I had a very successful DFS week because of that. Well, let's look into the whole composition here. Not a lot to kind of focus in on. You have, par 3s that range from very short to very long. You have some drivable par 4s on some days, depending on how pin positions are and tee boxes and wind. There are some drivable par 4s here, very, very risk reward. But you also have 3 to 4 now, long par 4s. And again, this is based on the PGA championships. So one of these par 5s is actually in this category here. So there's only 2 par 5s here and then one very long one. But again, there's no real consensus of par 4s, par fives, par threes. It's just a very spectacular test of golf. The approach shot distribution, well, you can see what matters here. A long course means long irons. 22%, 200 plus on the average PGA Tour event. Here it's 36%. Quite a difference. Quite a difference. You actually see some closer, say wedge shots, because some of these par fives just absolutely aren't gettable in two. Or if they are, players choose to be prudent and make it a 3-shot hole. So it's going to be imperative that players are playing these long irons, hitting these very well. So we're definitely going to be looking into this. When I was doing my initial research, I found that a lot of times when you see a course that has more approach shots come from a range than an average tour event, sometimes it doesn't play a big factor. It's just the way the course plays. That's not the case here. Absolutely, 200 plus is going to be something we're going to want to look at. I always like to see scoring distribution to par. This is pretty moderate, to be honest. You would think at a very difficult course you would have more bogeys than birdies. Like I said, the par fives are gettable if someone is playing well. Even the par fours can be gettable. Example, as we talked about, these drivable par fours. If guys are really hitting the tee ball well, putting well, there are birdies to be made, absolutely. But you can find yourself in trouble very quickly. As you can see, there are quite a bit more doubles than there are eagles. So it plays a little bit over par because of the doubles, but there's a few, and I mean it's minuscule, but a few more birdies than bogeys. So keep that in mind. Driving accuracy here is lower than normal. Kind of like Pete Dye, he loves to play tricks with your eyes on the tee and in your approaches. Sometimes it is better to land in the finish up in the right rough as opposed to in the fairway on the left side due to pin placements and dog legs and all that stuff. So Pete Dye is fantastic for doing that. So sometimes this is kind of a purpose miss. I kind of think of Harbor Town when I think of sometimes it's actually better to miss the fairway on the correct side than it is to find the fairway on the wrong one. So while they are difficult to hit here, and it can be punishing not to hit fairways here, don't take this, don't take that as an absolute. Pete Dye is, pretty famous for messing with players' eye lines and stuff. So green and regulation. Now this actually is, pretty darn accurate. This course is just, tough. As you can see here from long irons, the longer you are, the less you're going to hit the green. So green and regulation percentage here, lower than the average tour event. Scrambling is very difficult. These bunkers are cavernous. You've got pop bunkers. You've got cliff sides that fall into bunkers. I mean, there are spots on this course where you're 15 feet below the green in a bunker. I mean, it is extremely cavernous. So scrambling here is, if you're able to do it, it's a big plus, but you better not count on it. If you're going to miss your greens with any regularity, you better not count on scrambling. As we scroll down a little bit more, you can see the 3 putts here versus the average tour event. There's more undulating greens, fast greens. So yeah. Driving distance is actually longer here. Guys know that they just have to hit the ball far enough to give themselves a chance. They just do. They have to give themselves a chance on these long par 4s. When you have 415 and 515, 520 yard par fours. I mean, it's going to take a good drive and still a 200 yard approach shot. So, guys just have to hit it far and have to really be on point with the driver. Which you would think the proximity to the hole would be a lot more. It is, but not as much as you would think. It's only about 5 feet further. I mean, it's still a pretty big difference from the average tour event. But the reason it's not even more is that the par fives a lot of times are just 3-shotters. So guys are trying to give themselves a wedge and trying to make their birdie that way. But you can see here the distance of birdie putts made. Well, there's just not a lot of them. There's just not a lot of them. So fun course. It's gonna be fun to be a viewer, knowing that I don't have to play that course because I wouldn't be able to count as high as I would shoot. It might be the goal is always to shoot your age. Well, I probably would love to shoot maybe triple my age. That'd be great. I would love that. So there's a look at the course breakdown for Whistling Straits. Again, guys, chat's open. Let me know what you're wanting to look at. What you think's gonna play here. But moving on, let's look at the 2015 leaderboard. When Whistling Straits was last used on the PGA Tour. And you can see that the final score, minus 20, was actually, it's very low. Like I said, birdies are out there. In fact, scoring relative to par, the third round was pretty easy that year. The greens were, medium firmness. I don't take a lot into that. Hitting fairways was average and one round difficult. The winds were moderate. I've brought up Wind Finder. You're going to see that is not the case this year, at least projected 4 days out. So there are chances to score here. Rough length always long when you have fescue. But you see here, Jason Day had a very good week. Jordan Spieth second, Grace, Rose, Anirban Lahiri, and Brooks Koepka all were in the top 5 or tied for 5th. You have Dustin Johnson, who's here this week, obviously. Tony Finau tied for 10th that year. He's here. Henley's not here, excuse me. Rory, Justin Thomas, Terrell Hatton. Patrick Reed was left off, kind of the big debate in the golf circles, leading up to this event. Paul Casey, so on and so forth. So there is some familiarity with Whistling Straits. Absolutely. So it's not like that scores, low scores can't be out there. It'll definitely make a difference on alternate shot, who the captains pair with who and whatnot. But in 4-ball, someone goes out and there are rounds of 67, 66 out there. It's possible. It's absolutely possible. Let's take a look at the strokes gained from 2015. You can see here, off the tee was so very important. Jason Day was your winner. Led the field in off the tee. A lot of high finishes off the tee. Charles Howell made the cut. Morgan Hoffman made the cut. He couldn't do a damn thing else that week, but he was very good off the tee. That's why he made the cut. Same with Charles Howell III. The first missed cut you have is Shane Lowry down here. You've got a lot of people who are positive and big in the positive and off the tee, and a lot of high finishes here. So that just speaks to how important off the tee is. Jason Day led the field in off the tee and approach. When you do that, it's going to be very tough to beat you. How much that factors in can be a little deceiving. James Hahn was the the highest approach that missed the cut here. It's certainly a factor, but not as much as off the tee. We look at around the green, Jordan Spieth. That's prime Jordan Spieth. That's when he was making his hay. He would find himself out of position and somehow find his birdie or find his par. But you can see here that Jordan Spieth and Brooks Koepka were very good around the green, but it didn't necessarily lead to a lot of high success. Certainly it was important, but not a lot of high success. And then the putting, Lingmerth, Billy Horschel, Coetzee. But you look here, 7th, 12th, 3rd, 12th, 7th, 4th, 5th, 5th, 1st. Putting and off the tee. Driving and putting. That's a lot of golf. That's a lot of golf summed up in a nutshell. But off the tee and putting is going to be such a big factor this week. When I was looking through this, it was very interesting to see this view here. The driving, the fairways, the greens. You'll notice that driving distance, even for those who were negative, they were so darn close to field average that you can see distance is just important. It's just important. The guys who didn't hit the ball far, they really had to be on point with their irons to give themselves any kind of chance. Greens here. Jim Furyk was probably one of the leaders in greens and regulation. Troy Merritt. But you see a lot of missed cuts if you're not driving the ball far. Whereas the other way around, you got Bubba, who was just outside the top 20, 7th, 1st, 5th, 17th. There's a 3rd, there's a 5th, there's a 4th. The first missed cut is actually Adam Scott, and he couldn't really do anything else. They weren't good drives. He was just hitting the ball far. So you can see how imperative for the extremely top of the leaderboard, how important driving distance is. One of the factors that led me to have some pretty good success last week at the Fortinet, I looked at these good drives gained. And when I did so here, it wasn't a great indicator. It was a pretty stark contrast last week at Silverado. But here, you have Jason Day was 3rd in good drives. You had Spieth up here. But you don't see a lot of high finishes. You've got, certainly it's important to when they were making the cut, but it wasn't leading to, these podium finishes minus Day and Spieth, and those two were just astronomically ahead of others in other categories. You saw how Jason Day led the field in off the tee and approach. Spieth was around the green magic, so. So driving distance and then these greens and regulation. You've got a few players like Iwata was terrible with greens, so he made it up in different ways. But you see all the missed cuts if you're not hitting the greens and regulation. This explains it all. 4th, 1st, 2nd. Then you have some pretty lower finishes. I would imagine that their putting statistics were pretty bad. Example, Justin Thomas. He's generally not a good putter as is. But you see how imperative it was to hit the greens to make the cut, and then those who were the best at hitting greens, 4th, 1st, 2nd. It's going to be pretty darn important. So I'm definitely going to be looking at driving distance and greens and regulation from this view here as we go further in the week and we start digging into the data and producing a stat model. Birdies or bogeys, sometimes this is very good to look at, especially if you're on an easy course. You want to see all the birdies and eagles. If you're on an extremely difficult course, you want to see bogeys and such. But if anything, I'm gonna look at bogeys and doubles avoided as opposed to birdies. But I don't see a whole lot of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Direct correlation to extremely high finishes. I mean, birdies gained. So, I mean, you had Rose and Day and Lingmerth. I mean, but they're at the top of the leaderboard anyway. Bogeys avoided. Yeah, a lot of the top of the leaderboard. Doubles. So, but that's generally the case with any kind of leaderboard. The more birdies you make, the less bogeys you make. Obviously, you're going to be generally at the top of the leaderboard. So I don't know how much I'm going to lean into this view this week when evaluating the Ryder Cup. We'll look at the par threes here. You can see, again, par threes were pretty darn important. And it mainly was this very, very short par three. You had some high finishes here that were very good, but when you sort by the overall, I mean, they were still positive on that very, very short par three. So that might be something to look at. And then again, the two that you kind of see here were, somewhat field average, just a little bit under. So it might be something to look at. It's worth considering. But the par fours were, you saw how, it was the least important, at least by the graph. I think that's a little misleading. As you can see here, I mean, you have to go down quite a ways before someone is negative in the par 4 stroke gained, and even then they are, barely negative. So I'm definitely wanting to look at par 4s, especially since one of the par 5s has now been converted to a par 4 this week. And again, just off the top of off the head here, it looks like the drivable par 4s are where the strokes gained come into play. You have Bowditch and Howell, who are pretty good on them, but missed the cut. But otherwise, you've got, your winner. Justin Thomas was, top 20. Holmes, Watney, Rose was 4th. Koepka 5th. So Spieth down here at 2nd. Looks like this par 4 range, the drivable par 4s, are going to be worth looking at this week for sure. Maybe a little bit less than this 450, 500 maybe. But when I was looking through it, I was surprised, and then it kind of made sense that if birdies are a little bit difficult to have here, when you have a chance for a drivable par 4, you got to take advantage of it. So definitely looking at par 4s, probably of this range here. And then let's look at par 5s, because this is the most important aspect. When we looked at that graph on the breakdown, you can see how important the par 5s were here. And all of it's in this 550 to 600 range. So we're definitely going to narrow in on this when we make a data model. Definitely going to narrow in on this. As you can see how direct correlation it is to these extremely high finishes here at Whistling Straits. So going to look at the par 4s and maybe the drivable lengths, we'll see. But definitely this par 5 length. We definitely want to look at this. Proximity is pretty interesting. You just kind of needed to be the closest to the hole, which is, obvious things are obvious, Nick, but you see here, Jordan Spieth was about the lowest except for maybe Tony Finau. All these guys are, astronomically above the field in this proximity. I mean, even, Kuchar, to a lesser extent, Henley, Martin Keimer, especially Kuchar and Keimer, they were basically field average, a little bit under. Now, Lingmerth was pretty bad. Snedeker was bad. Lingmerth, we saw that all of his was in putting and off the tee, so he was not hitting his irons very well that week. Snedeker was probably even more so. I didn't think to narrow in on him. But proximity is going to be a major factor. And then you look at the 200 plus. Jason Day was probably one of the top ones here. Actually, you can scroll down a little bit, but he was still pretty positive. But you had 12th, 37th, 21st, 7th, 7th, 4th. So some high finishes here. It's basically the proximity. That's what we're going to look at. I might look a little bit in the 200 plus just because so many approach shots come from that range, but it's just the proximity total. It is what it is. You're just going to want to, with the difficulty of the greens, trying to avoid your 3 putts, you got to just get the ball as close to the hole as you can. There are not a lot of birdie putts to be made. And then speaking of putting, it's probably the biggest factor here. You see how high these metrics are to the field. I mean, the lowest one here in the top 20, top 15 is Brendan Steele at 1.8. Kuchar was barely negative. And then you had Rory, and Dubuisson was not great, but you had 17 of the top 20 were pretty extremely high in the strokes gained putting, and then you had another one, so 18 of the 20 were basically field average or better. Looks like 5 to 10 feet maybe worth something to look at to save your pars or those rare birdie opportunities when you get close. But overall, it's just strokes gained putting. So a lot of good statistics to look at this week. Going to be excited to do that. We'll dig into it a little bit more here, but that'll mainly be the focus tomorrow at the data dive. But seeing what we did there as we went through the individual views, let's just kind of take a look here. We saw how important strokes gained putting was. So I'm going to actually narrow this down to 36, and let's do bent, just because we know that they're bent greens. And in the last 36 rounds on bent greens, Patrick Cantlay is your number 1 putter for obvious reason. He does well at the BMW. He wins the BMW, does well at the Northern Trust. I mean, he wins the Memorial due to John Rahm's positive COVID test, but he really only had one really bad week on the greens in the FedEx Cup. Otherwise, I mean, you're seeing he gained 16. Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh dang, I'm looking at DK points. I apologize. So he had, gained 4 here, gained 5, gained 6. So, yeah, I mean, and when he is losing strokes, here he's basically field average, just under field average. He's not losing an entire stroke the times he is during the FedEx Cup. All positives here. So, but you see why it's important to narrow it down. I mean, you're looking at 2021, the Masters here. That's only maybe 16 rounds. You got 4, you got 8, you got 12. So the last 14 rounds were in 2021. So you got to make sure you're narrowing in on the data that you want to. 24 here. If you do 12, that only goes back. That goes back to the Memorial. If you want a more, who's hot now with the putter, but it's always important to make sure you know exactly what you're looking at. Because when you say last 24 rounds, you would think, maybe 24 rounds is only back to, say, June or, May or so. But 24 rounds goes all the way back to 2020, in the fall of 2020. So you make sure you know exactly what you're looking at. So having done that, let's actually narrow it down to the last 24 rounds. And it's still Patrick Cantlay. But Ian Poulter, Rory, DJ, and Xander Schauffele are the top 5 in the last 24 rounds. Then Spieth, Harris English, John Rahm, Finau, and Bryson round out the top 10 in putting. Some of your worst putters: Colin Morikawa, no surprise there. Scheffler, Brooks, Hovland, and Paul Casey. Paul Casey's a little bit of a surprise there. He's not exactly known for his putting, but bent is his favorite surface. So this is why I'm a little bit surprised, but he has not been good with the putter lately. And overall, he's not Brendan Todd or Adam Hadwin with the putter, but he's not as bad as he's shown. You see here, I mean, he lost 6.5 strokes on the green at the Northern Trust, lost 5 at the Travelers. Now, he did gain 7 at the St. Jude, and that's why you see a top 5 there. But even with these, -4s, gosh dang it, stop highlighting the entire thing. -4 there, minus basically 1.5, and still is having high finishes. That just speaks to how amazing his irons have been lately. Strokes gained approach. He's always been a spectacular iron player. He's even, more dialed in now. Off the tee is still a strength, not necessarily his biggest strength, but he's not terrible off the tee. So when or if he gets that putter going this week, look out for Paul Casey. So that's why I kind of wanted to look at that. Lee, Westwood, Sergio. Bernd Wiesberger is a very interesting case. See here, you might want to look at maybe the last 12 with Bernd Wiesberger, because the last 24, you're going all the way back to 2019 to get his last 24 rounds in. That's why I like doing this time frame of the last 2 years. So sometimes I'll go last 12 months, last 6 months, just to make sure I'm not including historical data that I don't want to include. And even so, he's only had one measured round, I should say, because remember, the Masters is proprietary, so we only see the strokes gained total. But he's only had one measured round where he was very good on bent greens. So there's a look at the putting real quick. I'm going to remove that filter. Let's look at off the tee. Let's look at off the tee on Pete Dye courses, because we established how much Pete Dye likes to play with players' lines, eye lines and such off the tee, where you think you need to be on the left side of the fairway and it's really more beneficial to be in the right, or maybe even the right rough. So strokes gained off the tee, and also factors in distance and all that stuff. And you can see here, just by going looking at the last 2 years, not very many have 24 rounds on Pete Dye courses. I mean, let's look at Brooks Koepka, for example. You got to go all the way back to the middle of 2020 to get Pete Dye course information. So we definitely want to shrink that a little bit. Let's just go with the last year. And you don't have anybody with 24. You've got very few over 12. So I'm going to actually narrow this down to last 12. And look at strokes gained off the tee. So Matthew Fitzpatrick is number 1 strokes gained off the tee on Pete Dye courses. You got Colin Morikawa, DJ, Deschamps, and Brooks Koepka are your top 5. Let's look at Fitzpatrick. That's an interesting name here. He's never been known for his prowess off the tee, but you can see here, I mean, the PGA this year, he was really good. The Heritage, he was positive all 4 rounds. The Players Championship, he was positive all 4 rounds. So, yeah, Matthew Fitzpatrick has been really darn good with the driver in his hands this year, at least this calendar year. Where it's been kind of troubling for him has been he's been hit and miss with his irons, with his approaches, and around the green has been pretty bad, at least on these Pete Dye courses. Now his putting he's always been known as a good putter, so this is probably no surprise. But but I don't take a lot of stock into Pete Dye greens. Maybe I should, but I haven't historically, or I haven't tended to. I've been more focused on the surface type as opposed to the architect green type, but maybe I should. But he's always been known as a good putter. But yeah, off the tee, he's been positive in all but one round measured in on Pete Dye courses. And you can see here in Fantasy National, the Pete Dye courses, there's Harbortown, Kiowa, TPC River Highlands, and TPC Sawgrass. So there's not a lot of courses to get your data from. Harbortown's the RBC Heritage. Kiowa, I believe, Kiowa was this year's PGA. Sawgrass is the Players every year. TBC Highlands is that that's the one in Connecticut, I believe. What's the one is that the Rocket Mortgage? I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. But TPC River Highlands, there's nothing there for Fitzpatrick. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That was just for Fitzpatrick. So all of Pete Dye's courses, either Crooked Stick, there's Harbortown, Kiowa, the Stadium course, that is PGA West, I believe. TPC Louisiana, which is the Zurich, River Highlands, Sawgrass, and Whistling Straits. Now it's bothering me which one TPC River Highlands is. Let's see. Travelers. That's what it is. The Travelers in Connecticut. I knew it was Connecticut. I couldn't remember which tournament. That's Travelers. My apologies. So yeah, interesting to see there with Pete Dye off the tee numbers in the past 12 months. If we just take the Pete Dye filter off and just look at off the tee in general, no surprise. Desham, Jon Rahm, Brooks Koepka. Actually, let me widen this a little bit. Let's go 24 rounds since the Pete Dye filter's not on. Still mainly the same. Desham, Koepka, Rahm, Rory, Fitzpatrick still fifth. Sergio, Cantlay, Hovland, JT, and Paul Casey. I think the next thing I kind of want to look at is driving distance. So let's look at fairways, greens. Driving distance, no surprise here. Most of the same names: Desham, Rory, Rahm, Brooks, and DJ. Then the rest of the top 10 is Sergio, Xander, JT, Finau, and Scotty Scheffler. At the bottom of this, you have Poulter, Westwood, Wiesberger, Daniel Berger, and Colin Morikawa. Kind of no surprise here. Daniel Berger is solid. He's just not the longest off the tee. Colin Morikawa has never been known as his for length off the tee. But when you have 3 Euros, which probably should be no surprise just because it's a different style of golf, mainly for Euros. But these 3 are at the bottom of the driving distance. That doesn't bode exactly the best for them, at least. And then looking at greens and regulation, Cantlay, probably no surprise. He's been playing very well. Jon Rahm, Sergio, Scheffler, and Shane Lowry are the top 5. Then Casey, Berger, Hovland, Finau, and Justin Thomas. I'm trying to think here if there's anything in the immediacy that we kind of want to look at with Fantasy National. Maybe let's look at the par 4s real quick. I don't want to do too much data diving because that's tomorrow. But the drivable par 4s, Xander, Sergio, Cantlay, Lee Westwood, and Shane Lowry. You got Berger, Wiesberger. Oh, look at that. Berger and Wiesberger. I just kind of want to see that on Sunday in the singles. Which Berger? Yeah, that was corny, I know. Sorry, but yeah. Morikawa, Fitzpatrick, and Rahm. Yep, that's the singles match I want to see right there. Berger and Wiesberger. Yes, calling it right now. We're going to end at least the fantasy national portion of the initial research. Let's look at the Ryder Cup's kind of overview, hole by hole, and we're not going to get too much into it, but this should give you an idea of just the layout, the undulation, and so on. You got to just bunkers everywhere, the undulation. First tee shot, nerve-wracking. Fairway metal down the center of the fairway, leaving a short iron approach. The common theme here is going to be greens that are severely protected, either by runoff areas or cliffside bunkers. There's not a lot of quote bailout. You just have to hit your irons, and the key to doing that is being at the right spot to approach, and that's why off the tee is going to be so important. Hole 2, par 5, long slender fairway, requires 2 very long, very accurate shots to have a chance at eagle. Some players are sure to give it a try. A deep pot bunker is 35 yards short of the green, presents a real obstacle for players that are going for it in 2. Hole 3, par 3, 181. Really not too much here. You can just see how heavily protected. If you go left and then long right, you're just heading towards Lake Michigan. So pick your number and hit the shot. Hole 4, again, along the shoreline of Lake Michigan. If you are left, you're running towards it, so that's an issue. Again, just accuracy. Just got to be accurate. Hole 5, the snake. Pretty much a severe dog leg here, and then this is the one hole that water comes into play. It's likely a 3-shotter, sharp S-shaped fairway. Anyone brave enough to try hitting their second into the green will be challenged with a long carry over water to a shallow green with no room for air short or left. The more conservative play is to hit their approach, somewhere in here, give themselves a wedge. Hole 6, short. This is one of the drivable par 4s. Tee placement and hole location will have a significant impact on how players play this short dog leg. If the tees are up and the hole location's on the left half of the putting surface, players will try driving the green. If the tees are back or the hole location's to the right, the smart play is a long iron for position and then a short iron for accuracy. Missing the green short or right leaves a difficult up and down from very deep pot bunkers. You can see, I was hoping you could see it. It's getting caught off here. Very deep pot bunkers over here to the right. 7, par 3, par 3, long par 3, 221. This is what I was saying. If you're right, this is somewhere between 8 to 12 feet below the putting surface. Just pick your number and stick it, because if you're left here, you're above the hole, chipping out of this fescue, and you could very well run down there anyway because you can't control your chip shot. So just premium on accuracy. Hole 8, long par 4. You can see here just how protected the green is. Landing area is hidden, challenging players to keep tee shots left to avoid a severe drop-off. This is what I was meaning by Pete Dye playing with your eyesight. A lot of his shots are blind, especially off the tee. So you really have to do some research or just trust your line and hit the shot. Hole 9, par 4, pretty straight away par 4, to be honest. But not a lot here. Just, again, you see how narrow the fairway is. Accuracy is the key. Hole 10, short par 4. Aggressive play off the tee is the driver, as close to the left edge as you can. If you're too far left, it'll run into, kind of this rough fescue area. But you still have to hit it long because it's a very steep uphill climb to the green. So only the biggest of big hitters are going to try it, Bryson. But yeah. Hole 11 is the one I kind of wanted to look at. This is the par 5 converted par 4. So par 4, 520 yards, going to be very, very difficult. Players will have to be careful to favor the left side. Anything right swallowed by sand dunes. Second shot must avoid a huge bunker on the left. Yeah, you can see here. That extends about 100 yards from the green. This is the sandbox for which the hole is named, more than 16 feet deep and presenting any player with a blind shot into the green. So you are 16 feet below the putting surface if you find the sandbox. I can tell you right now, I just pick the ball up, take my 10 and go. If my playing group would let me. If I found the sandbox. Hole 12, par 3, the very, very short par 3. Shortest hole in the course, features what's probably the most difficult green to manage. Playing downhill to a very large undulating green. A hole location to the back right will prove especially daunting. Trying to hit over this bunker here to a green that really narrows in the back. Even a shot that hits the middle of the green could bounce or roll into the deep bunkers. Shorter right isn't any better, with 40-foot drops into dunes in Lake Michigan. So yeah, hole 13 along the shoreline. Tee and hole location have a significant impact. Everything slopes severely towards Lake Michigan, so you really have to favor the left side of the fairway just to keep it. Think of Pebble Beach, how the first part of that fairway, I think it's 6. 6, because it's the one right before the signature hole, signature par 3. Everything slopes to the right there. That is this fairway here, just sloping towards the towards Lake Michigan. 14, severe dog leg here. The last of the short par 4s. Most players hit a long iron for position. Tee shots left, find a very big bunker here. A player driving to carry this bunker tries to hit the green, large undulating green. Anything other than on the green will leave a difficult shot at saving par. 15, long par 4. I think it's the hardest hole on the course. Nope, excuse me, third. The 18th, the toughest. But this is the grandstand hole. This is it says here, arguably the most difficult 4-hole finishing stretch in golf. Beautiful par 4, requires a long, accurate, long iron approach. Par here could easily win the hole. Don't be surprised if many a match are ended here. 16, shortish par 5, to be honest. Most players to hit driver in hopes of going for it in 2. But you have to be extremely accurate as left is running down these cliff sides, right's in the middle of fescue. The approach shot, it's a short wedge if you lay up to an elevated green with nothing but the sky and Lake Michigan as the backdrop. So again, playing with your eye lines, this time with the wedge. 17, long par 3. Best players in the world are sure to be intimidated with a match or perhaps the Ryder Cup itself on the line. Players must be careful not to miss left. As you can see, it's just death. It's just death all the way down this cliff. Not that the ride is any more comforting, since a large elevated dune starts 40 yards short of the green. Playing over the bunker may well be the safest play, but straying just a little to the right will find a steep hillside loaded with bunkers. And then the most difficult hole on the course, the par 4 18th at 515 yards, named Diabolical for a reason. Challenging finishing hole where par is always a good score. A tee shot down the right will find the fairway and leave a mid to long iron approach. If you want to be aggressive, it demands a carry. Going left demands a carry of 300 yards over dunes and bunkers. And if it goes too far, it will leave a severe downhill lie. 7 Mile Creek runs in front of the green. And this is a natural amphitheater for the end of the Ryder Cup. So hopefully that helped provide a little bit of overlooks, some eyesights for Whistling Straits this week. Last but not least, we're going to look at the wind. And again, this is just, it's 4 days out. But let's look at this, because this is interesting. And this is why I think the Euros might have an advantage if the wind keeps up as it's predicted now. So Thursday is pretty, I won't say benign, but pretty consistent. Very chilly. 61 is the high on Thursday, at least projected right now. No rain in sight, just some wind. You can see here in the morning, it's straight, into the face. I'm assuming you're driving this way. I mean, who knows? That might be with the wind, but I'm just going to assume you're looking that way. But it changes drastically overnight, and you can see, you've got sustained wind speeds of 17, 20 miles an hour, gusts up to 35 miles an hour, a little bit warmer. That is link style golf, which is what the Euros are known for. The Americans picked Whistling Straits because of the length, but this might set up well for the Euros if this wind ends up being projected as it is now. And then the weekend, fairly benign here on both days. It looks like Friday is the haymaker for wind. And again, take that for what it's worth. It's 4 days away. But that's going to do it for the Ryder Cup initial research show. Make sure to tune in tomorrow as we really dig into some data around the 24 golfers at Whistling Straits. In the comments, let me know how you did this week at the Fortinet. Again, pretty successful for DFS, but nothing on the sportsbook side for me. What are you looking for in the data dive tomorrow? What statistics do you think are going to play well at Whistling Straits? What are you looking for? What do you want to see? So leave that in the comments or reach out to me on social media. But if you're making any early bets for the Ryder Cup, or you have some office pools with your buddies, for this week, for today, the rest of the week, may all your bets be